Welcome to Conversations with Asha and Steve, where communication matters. Join us as we discuss effective ways to communicate, bridge the gaps, and build long-lasting relationships within your business and life. Here are your hosts, Asha Prasad and Steve Harper.
Hey, welcome to Conversations with Asha and Steve. I'm Steve Harper. With me is my amazing co-host, Dr. Asha Prasad. Asha, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Steve. How's it going over there?
It is going great. I am excited for today's conversation. What are we talking about? I know we're continuing the series, right?
Hmm?
So,
Yeah.
what are we talking about in this next question we should be asking ourselves?
So with this series, we wanted to go over like what the questions that we need to be reflecting upon and asking ourselves. And this question today is, how do I let emotions run my life? How do they run their life? Or do they run your life? Are you a robot? It may be that you're just methodically going through. I don't know. But
I'm Tesla. Well, it's a good one because I think oftentimes, and you know this as well as I do with regards to the clients that we work with from a coaching perspective, it's often the emotions that get us in the most trouble and often cloud our judgment, our thinking, our decisions. And it's not probably a question that we're asking nearly enough. Like, am I being emotionally, am I overly emotional about this decision or this,
right.
circumstance that's happening to me? I think it's an important one for us to, in the moment, take a time out, stop, and
Mhm.
recognize what are we feeling right in that moment. Is it instant anger? Is it sadness? Is it frustration? And how is that actually impacting what next comes out of our mouth or how we respond or react to certain
Right.
circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Here's the thing, we're human beings, we have a wide range of emotions. Like that's just what we're made up of mostly is this wide range of emotions. But I think it's a matter of like, how do we get a hold of our emotions, not letting our emotions run us,
Yeah,
but being able to recognize, for example, like if you're faced with a big decision, if your immediate reaction is anger or just like frustration or whatever, knowing that, you know what, take a 2 minute, anger like outburst that you need to do, let that emotion run through you rather than trying to push it away. Because I think a lot of times when we try to push it down, it's going to rear its ugly head somewhere along the way without us even being able to really get a handle on it. So I think that it's about remaining professional, remaining respectful, and then figuring out what emotion do you want to be in, what state of emotion do you want to be in when you're making those decisions, for
yeah,
example, um, and I know it can be challenging. It can be really challenging sometimes because sometimes we get hit with things and we're just like, oh my God, and that emotion is just like there
yeah,
before we even know it. It's like there. But I think it takes some practice and some real, like, not, I don't want to say control because I think it's more of a discipline, more of a practice of like, okay, I'm going to take a pause or I'm going to count to 10 before I say anything. And
yeah.
like that is just your way of dealing with things because I think that we can tend to be more reactive than responsive, which I think are two very different ways of, communicating with people.
Absolutely. I had
Yeah.
a teacher that I remember that was really good at diffusing situations in the classroom when I was like
Mhm.
maybe a junior or senior in high school. And
Right.
when we had a couple of challenging students that were in the class that didn't really want to be
Hmm.
there and at every turn was making fun of or trying to or undermine what was happening on
Right.
that particular day. And he had this great way of just stopping and
Hmm.
looking, and you could just tell by he was, now I know what it is, right? At the time I
Right.
didn't know what it was. I'm like, oh man, this guy's gonna blow. Um, but he would just center himself for a second before he allowed himself to say a word, and almost always could turn the circumstance to the point where that individual that was trying to get the attention or trying to get his
Mhm.
goat lost every single time because
Right.
it was kind of hard to explain in terms of how you could just see this transformation from being
Right.
really in the moment and then having somebody try to undercut you and him just stopping, and where he really wanted to respond in an angry manner or send the kid out of the classroom or
Exactly.
whatever. He was able to, I just remember he just always did this, and you could tell,
Hmm.
okay, something's coming. And then by the end of the school year, right, this couple of things happened. When and if it did happen and he did this, we knew something had shifted. There was
Exactly.
a disturbance in the force. And he was about to completely eviscerate somebody by not eviscerating them. It was really
Right.
interesting because he could take the emotion of the situation and he could just turn it from a 10 down to a 1, and it took
Right.
all the power away. And really, by the end of the semester, he had made huge inroads with this kid who
That's
actually
great.
learned and really took
Right.
what we were doing in that class a lot more seriously. Still had, and I think, now knowing what we know about, some of the mental challenges kids have, I think there was,
Yeah.
definitely something going on with brain chemistry and probably a drug problem at the
Right.
time.
Right.
Um, but he somehow was able to figure out how to completely center this kid
That's
and
awesome.
de-accelerate any situation that went on just by this.
Yeah.
And then everything
Exactly.
that came out of his mouth next, you knew was purposeful. And I remember asking him one time, because I was actually his aide in the next class. I'm like, how do you deal with that every day? And he said, you have two
Right.
choices, right, in life: how you
Hmm.
respond and how you react. And
Yeah.
I have always remembered that.
Yes.
Not always followed it, I can admit, in my own personal life. But it is
Right.
really interesting how figuring out that that's the situation where before you are going to lash out or before you're going
Hmm.
to open your mouth, that you're taking that, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds,
Right.
and you're gathering your thoughts, gathering your approach that you're going to take, and how differently that can change an entire circumstance. Like I've seen it in the
Definitely.
professional world. Like you put a idea out on the table and somebody immediately says, "Oh, that's stupid," and you have to like, this is why it's not stupid, and you're like, you now it's
Right.
like, it's your fight mode. Okay, that's interesting. Let me think about what you just said. Can you
Exactly.
elaborate? Could you share why you don't think it's a good idea? Give us a little more. And
Exactly. So
some
asking
people that are
questions,
just,
asking.
yeah,
Yep.
it's a big factor in terms of kind of de-escalating the situation. But more so, not on, we only escalate those situations with other people is because how we respond and react to those people,
Exactly.
and that
It's true.
just kind of kicks it up from an 8 to a 9 to a 10. So if you
Yeah.
can figure out how to calm yourself in that moment and not allow emotion to cloud your judgment, which it very
Yeah.
well can, it becomes a real secret weapon, I think, in a lot of ways, to be able to do that.
I think so too. I remember someone telling me a long time ago, when you choose to respond to something rather than react, you're being responsible, responsibility, that
Yeah,
kind of thing. And
yeah,
it's so true, because may not be able to determine how someone is going to perceive things or receive things from
yeah,
us. But if we know that we are responding from a responsible standpoint of, like, okay, this is our intention to actually respond in a compassionate, empathetic, respectful way, then we know that we've done everything that we could. Now, if that other person decides to react still, it's still in our power to be able to be like, okay, I'm not going to let this escalate. We're going to get to the bottom of it. And I think it's brilliant, Steve, what you were talking about. Ask more questions. When somebody says something like that, oh, that's just such a dumb idea, or that's just a waste of time, it's really, it kind of gets under your skin and you want to react immediately. But then at the same time, if you can take that moment and just be like, okay, so tell me why. Why do you think that way? What is your perspective? Share with everybody it really changes things. It diffuses any kind of escalation immediately.
yep,
And I think that this is one of the most important things when communicating, whether it's personal relationships, professional relationships, just everywhere, that we have as a secret tool. In a way, we
yeah.
have that ability if we practice it.
Yeah, and it works both ways too, right? You know that we were kind of talking
Right.
about the negative reaction, but it also can be positive. We are
Yeah.
in the moment. We volunteer for something, or we say, "Yes, absolutely, I'll go to dinner next Tuesday," and you're like, "Oh crap, I don't really want to go to dinner next Tuesday," but you'll let the
Exactly.
emotions take over. And I
Right.
think that if you happen to run hot on your emotions, either super
Mhm.
enthusiastic or super negative, this is why this question is super critical for you to really
Right.
consider moment by moment in every situation, because it will help avoid you overcommitting or potentially, derailing a conversation or a situation. It'll help you get your balance back relative to
Right.
really how you want to be perceived or how you might truly want to respond. I think that not having this question sort of at the ready where you can pull it out and contemplate it
Mhm.
in the moment is a disadvantage. It'll actually work us into certain circumstances we may later regret. And so I think
Exactly.
there's a real value in this question, and it's one of the important ones. I know for a fact myself, I've had to really ask myself this question when I get a negative email or I've had a situation at work
Mhm.
that I'm super frustrated about, because my my mind goes, to a place where you
Mhm.
just have to fight or flight, and that
Right.
becomes a problem. And it
Yeah.
is a practice. It is absolutely something that you
Right.
have to practice. And the first step in the practice is asking yourself the question, right? How am I letting those
Exactly.
emotions control my decisions? What my words are? How I'm communicating? And then how do I want those emotions to be perceived so that I can make this as beneficial of an outcome as I possibly
Mhm.
can. And I think you
Yeah.
have to have that pause, and that this moment. I do this a lot in my staff meetings
Yeah.
because, and not, I don't carry the power that Mr. Stevenson did in his classroom. However, everybody knows that when I do this, that they're probably not going to get an immediate answer, right? I'm not
Right.
going to just be like, absolutely, we got to do that, or that's,
Exactly.
no, I don't want to go that way. Let me think about it. Let me have a few minutes
Exactly.
to contemplate it, and I'll get back with you.
Yeah, I think that that's really important that that you know what, we don't have to have an answer right away in any way, whether it's business or it doesn't matter. We don't have to have an answer right away.
Yeah.
Learning how to communicate and saying, "You know what? I need some time to think about that. Let me get back to you on it." I think is really good because that person on the other side feels heard and you have actually given yourself a little bit of time, especially if it's not an immediate yes or an immediate no, that you're just kind of, waffling back and forth of what do I do? What do I do? It gives that time and you respect the inner, the interaction at that point. We don't do that enough in our society.
No,
I don't think
no.
I don't think that we do it enough.
No, I agree. And really, the
Yeah.
only time that you're ever in a situation where it's requires that immediate response is if you're
Mhm.
you're diffusing bombs, right? And okay, is it the right is it the right wire or the red wire or the
Like
yellow
this
wire?
year.
I mean, everything else can pretty much take a at least a 30-second
Yeah,
to 5-minute pause while you contemplate how
exactly.
you want to respond. I just think that this is a really good question for people to really absorb and put in their back pocket,
Right.
because it's an important one. And I think you'll find that when you take that um, sort of intentional pause and you're a little bit
Yeah.
more, um, you spend a little bit more time in your thoughts about really how you want to proceed, how you want to respond or react, and you let people
Right.
know, hey, that I'm going to need a minute, or I'm going to need I'm going
Exactly.
to need to think this over. Then you're training them to know that you're really coming at it from a place of real careful
Right.
consideration, and that really has some benefits as well. So,
Yeah,
this is
definitely.
another really good question for our folks to be considering. I mean, we've got this entire series of questions that we hope that
Mhm.
you'll keep somewhere on your computer monitor, near your phone, on a sticky note on your mirror somewhere. But these are
Right.
things that probably day by day they're going to come up, and they're an opportunity for you to really say, "Whoa, hold on." Let me consider this. Let me ask myself this question. Let me see how I want to proceed. So, I'm enjoying this series a lot, because it's
Thank
given me
you.
even food for thought in terms of how some of the ways that I respond, especially in this particular question, is always a
Right.
work in progress.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, Steve. I like that, I think it's really important that we ask ourselves questions. We're so like geared towards always externalizing everything, speaking out and talking to other people, and that's great. But we've got to have some internal dialogue, and
Yep.
really some disciplined internal dialogue where we're really focused and intentional with what we're asking ourselves. So I really enjoy this series because I think I've gotten some feedback from some people that have been listening to our first two episodes, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, I never thought about that. Oh, that really gives me something to think about." And
Yep.
and I think it's really important that self-inquiry really helps you be a better communicator, be a better, better in your relationships with each other.
Absolutely. Well, we'd love to hear from our audience. I mean, what are you taking from these
Definitely.
questions? What do you think of this particular episode and this particular question? How have you used it? Have you did it get you thinking a particular different way, or maybe something that said, I do need to do this. I need to ask this question a little bit more intentionally. So let us know, Asha. How can they do that?
So definitely go to our YouTube channel, subscribe there, drop us a comment there, follow us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, Conversation with Ash and Steve, and we'd love to hear from you. We really enjoy hearing. We take all feedback that we get from our listeners into consideration, and we just enjoy having these conversations.
Yeah, and if it's negative feedback, we don't respond immediately.
We take our
We're
time.
intentional about the question. How do I want to respond? I'm just kidding. We never get any negative feedback. We have awesome, awesome listeners, and we're so grateful that you guys tune in, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, or on the podcast platforms. We're certainly grateful for you guys participating with us. We'll be back again with another episode of Conversations with Asha and Steve, and another question in this series very soon.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Conversations with Asha and Steve. We love to hear feedback and questions from our listeners. Please feel free to visit our Facebook page for more tips and information. You can also email us directly at info@ripplecentral.com for more information.